All right, we'll call the meeting to order here. If we can get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Commissioner Huntosh.
Here.
Commissioner Husnick. President Bain. Commissioner Finneman.
Here.
Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
And Commissioner Archer.
Do you, I don't see, usually pledge allegiance on the, is that?
Yeah, that was an overlook on my part, so yeah, we can.
You can do it.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and then just a little conversation here. There isn't anything to approve today's agenda, but there's a request to add something to the agenda, I guess?
Well, if there's time today, I don't think this will consume our time here, what I see on the agenda. I wasn't sure to add an idea of a discussion point now or do it at the end of the meeting when we typically ask for anybody want to talk about something in addition. I would like to see the Hool property be a discussion point today.
I think we're fine with that. Is there anyone have an issue with that? Okay. All right, and then the next item is to approve the minutes from the February 11th meeting.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstained? Okay, then, so we're at 4, the CDA pre-development grant application. I don't know who's taking this one, if Patrick you are, or if Chris, or...
Chris with Dan.
Chris,
I can start it out. Members of the EDA, if you recall, we've worked with the Washington County CDA on a pre-development grant application for when we did some initial studying on the McCullough property and did some scoping work on that. This will be our second grant application for Washington County pre-development grant. It was kind of decided kind of at the last, we started looking through all the parcels in Forest Lake, is to focus on the city-owned 117 acres and headwaters. If you recall back to, I think it was February, mid-February, we had the meeting with Bruce Saylor from Connexus Energy and Chris Sang both came in and kind of gave us an overview of the technology corridor that we're working on in partnership with other neighboring communities. This 117 is the parcel that at this point the city is looking at adding into that corridor, just so if a technology company or a data center is looking for a spot to put a project, that's kind of one of the ones that we're leading out with. As part of that, to kind of help to position that land to make it more competitive in that marketplace, we looked at doing a CDA pre-development grant for that to try to look at what are some of the things that we can do to keep this parcel in the running for if a data center, technology center, if we're going to be in the running for a site selector. In talking to people within the industry who kind of do site selections, they've kind of recommended, they say, site selectors don't look for reasons to keep you in, they look for reasons to knock you out. And that can be as simple as not having a study done, having some of this pre-work done can definitely keep you in the running longer for trying to land one of those projects. So two of the things that we looked at as we kind of looked at how we would scope a grant application for this parcel would be to conduct a wetland delineation on the parcel, which will again kind of help to let the developer know what land is available for development and kind of help lay out the story of how their project would lay on that 117 acres. And then the second would be to conduct a phase 1 environmental study. Again, these are two projects that check two boxes if a site selector is looking for, potential sites. These are two kind of good base documents to have in the mix, especially for like a wetland delineation. If they're coming in the fall, or in the wintertime, they won't be able to do that until the spring. So having that done, it's just one of those things that kind of gives you the leg up in a fairly competitive marketplace. So we basically took those two ideas, packaged them up, and you do see the grant application that's attached here, the draft application. And what's being presented tonight is the phase 1 environmental and the wetland delineation. Bolton and Mink is the engineering firm that would be doing the wetland delineation on the parcel, and then Braun Intertech would complete the phase 1 environmental work that's out there. Total cost for both projects is $9,800, so we're right under that $10,000 cap, which is what the grant pays at at 20% city match at that point. The numbers in here, Chris pointed out, I have to do a little bit of adjustments on the final application. I'd have to do a couple, my totals were just slightly off on how I broke the two apart. So I'll make that adjustment when it's submitted. But at this point, the recommendation is to approve the grant application, and then also there's a resolution that's also attached to it that authorizes the EDA to apply for the CDA pre-development grant. Same resolution that was passed at the McCullough property when we applied for that application. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions on it, or if you have any other additional details required or needed on the grant application.
Well, when I look at this, it's pretty clear that it's a wetland delineation, just information about the property. It's research and site examination relative to hazardous issues that might exist on the site, whatever might be known. No borings or anything else in this particular one. And my curiosity is that we're not defining any kind of land usage, any divisions, any infrastructure. We're not doing any of that at this point. And so, having received a letter from Mr. Jensen, I'm just curious about how you see this, because it's essentially just that. It's information on the property.
I'd be glad to address it if you'd like.
Yeah, that's fine. If you,
Good evening, Jamie Jensen. With me is Craig Brischke. He is the owner of the golf course, Tanner's Brook Golf Course, and we'll be trying to develop on the north side of the property. And I saw that this grant application, and I was kind of perplexed by it for a couple of reasons, and I'll address those. Number 2, right here, sort of bottom 2/3 of the first page, the request says, has a developer or end user been identified or committed to the proposed site? Boy, that's me all day long. I presented a plan and a request to purchase it, and I have the golf course here, wishing to do it, Mr. Brischke, and the application says there's nobody. The answer is no. Well, I'm here. I wish to purchase 20% of the property. I'd like to purchase all 117 acres. Right now, I'd like to develop the 59 lots that I've got planned, but for some reason, this application says that there's nobody who's been identified. So I think you all know that I've been identified, but I guess it says something differently here. Also, it says, describe any studies or development activities at the proposed site or project area that have already been completed or are currently underway. Once again, that's me, and it says not applicable. I don't know why that is. The 2 studies that you want to do, one is a wetland delineation. That's only good for a short time anyway, a couple of years perhaps, but anybody who's putting in the project is going to do their own. So I'm not quite sure why you would do a wetland delineation, because when there's going to be a plat done, they're going to have to do another one anyway. So I'm not certain why you would do that. Also, phase 1 environmental study, you don't do a phase 1 environmental study unless there's some indicia of hazardous waste. There's been a gas station there, there's been a leak, there's been waste or something. This is an alfalfa field. I can tell you right now, without even being out there, you're not gonna find anything. So that's what, in my mind, I don't see the value in doing it. So at this time, I don't see the value in doing either of them. But I do see that it says it will take till July to do these. I'd like to get started on my project so that I can perhaps, with good luck and good weather, start doing construction later on in the year. And I want to purchase 17.4 acres north of the golf course that the city owns. I'd like to do that as soon as possible and work that into the project. We have a 59 lot project slated for the area. Presuming it's a 60 lot project and each home, there's a builder, each home sells for $400,000. That's a $24 million project out there, and it's being held up for a $10,000 study. I guess I'm not, I wish it wasn't. I'd like to buy the property. I'd like to put in a project. I understand the city is very pro-development, and yet I'm getting these roadblocks, and I'd like to get them removed. If, however, you do wish to go forward with the studies, I'd like to pay for it. I'd like to contract with Bolton and Bank. I'd like to contract with Braun Intertech. I've worked with Braun Intertech several times. I'll pay for it. I'll get it done. I'll bring you the results. I'll have them bring you the results. Because it's not going to take me 4 months to get it done. It's going to take me about 10 days to get both of these studies done. And I'm willing to pay for that and give you the results. But my request tonight is to say no to the study. And also, if you would be so kind, send a recommendation to the city council to sell me the land.
Could I ask, I haven't followed how formally you have approached the city. Do you have a formal purchase agreement in with the city that's under consideration at this point? Are you formally in front of the city? with
No,
that?
I sent a letter to Mayor Bain and said, and to the council, and said, I am ready to buy the land. Can we sit down and talk about it? And the response I got back from Mayor Bain was, we need to do these 2 studies first before we can talk about selling it at all. So, no, I don't have a purchase agreement. If you would like one, I can have one by tomorrow.
Your concern is partly timing. So same study, same information, timing predicated on, I guess, when the engineers and others can actually do it. You're beginning your building, are you not, off city property?
Yes, we,
So you are beginning, you have the ability to build at this point up to a point.
yeah, we're trying to put in 17 lots now. We're starting the process on that.
Not knowing how that continues on to city land or having officially the approval to do that because it's not fixed yet, does that present you a problem, or does what you develop end and continue in the future? Is there any dilemma for you now?
Oh, yes, and if I can show you on a map, I'd be glad to do so. I'm sorry, I don't have the, so I'll just have to kind of physically show you here on this map. This is 53 lots, and the city has this plan. Right now, we're just doing this little triangle down here. This will be 17. We've also worked out to get some of this down here to get up to 17. Otherwise, we only have 12 lots, and we don't have enough weight to take it forward with just 12 lots. So 17 helps us take it forward. But here is the Met Council Interceptor sewer line. And we need to attach that to get our sewer in. Right now, the plan would be to come across city line, purchase this 17 acres up here, and put the sewer line right here in the land we would purchase. But because we're not purchasing it, we have to run it down on the golf course, run it along the city parcel, out here to where we'll be developing, and then service these lots. If the city sells us the land next year, we just wasted all that line, have to abandon that and start again coming up through this line. So it would be better if we could do this now and do it all at one time and just attach into the Met Interceptor one time.
For your 12, the phase 1 off-city property,
Yes.
are you already approved through the city process for that development?
No, we have gotten through the informal concept plan with staff. And on Wednesday, we go before the Planning Commission for recommendations. Donovan Hart has put in a note on that. I don't know if you've seen it. He's recommending denial of our concept plan. There's no vote at a planning commission on a concept plan. There's nothing to, this is the part that's perplexing. You don't consent to or deny a concept plan. It's just to come in and look and see if the roads work and see if there's sewer nearby and see if you want to put a park there or not. But it's just recommendations. There's no up or down on this, but for some reason he's recommended denial of a concept plan. And his recommendation is because he wanted a letter of utility availability. And I talked to him and I said, I don't know what a letter of utility availability is. Would you send me one so I can give it to my engineer to provide to you? And he wrote back and said, I don't know what one is either. We've never had one before. We asked a previous developer to do it, and he didn't do it. So I don't have an example to send you. So I went onto your own website and got down your water map, and I went onto your website and got down the sewer map, got my engineer's calculations, and sent that letter in. But he wants it denied because he didn't get the letter. Well, he's gotten the letter now. I don't know what his position is, but for us, this is a great project, and we're just running into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and I don't know why. And I've asked the city council to be on the agenda for the next workshop I mean, if you don't want me here, I'll go. You know, I don't want to spend any more money in the city if you don't want me here. You know, so if that's the, you know, either have me come here or don't have me come here, but I'm tens of thousands of dollars into this now, and if it's going to fail, he should know, so he marks it, you know, can market the property to someone else. I can quit spending money, you know. And you know, the other side of this is, why would you set this property up to be a data center? There are 10,000 uses for this property. Why would you say, everybody go away, we want a data center here? I'm not following that track, but I'm not, you know, in government, so I don't really know. But I stand on the property, you know, where we're developing. I can see 1,000 acres vacant from there. If a data center wants to be there, they got all the space in the world out there, you know. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to avoid these studies. I'd like to request, if you would be so kind, ask the city to sell me the land.
Well, aside from the data center issue, I have to put that aside in my head as well. I understand, I think, the dilemma of timing and being able to move forward at least on a portion of a project. So I guess my question is to the city staff. Where are your thoughts on all this at this point?
Well, if you recall, a few meetings ago, when we had the is it Nexus Energy in here, we went through a presentation and we had a discussion about the best use for this property. And it was decided at that meeting that we would go forward with these grants to help us to begin the decision on what the best use of the property is, whether it is commercial, whether it's a data center, whether it's residential. City owns the property, and we have a responsibility to figure out which is the best use for the property. So, being that discussion, this is why the grant's here. Second of all, as far as purchasing let me go back and let me say, the offer to do the study and spend the money from Mr. Jensen, we will refuse that now because he has just stated publicly that he wants to buy the land, and by giving us $10,000 for a study, I believe there might be a conflict and a perception of not doing things quite above board, which I will always avoid. And three, the land's not for sale. As far as the application goes, as was stated, we haven't sold the land. We have no developer that we're going to sell the land to yet. So the application is correct. We believe, and again, going back to the discussion we had, is we need to know what the city owns the land, and we need to understand what the best use of it's going to be. And if it turns out it's high-end housing or along the golf course, that's fine. If it turns out if it's a data center, that's fine. If it turns out it's a Cub food, that's fine. But we have to understand what that best interest is. Why we're looking at a data center, because we know we're trying to establish in the county with the county a technological corridor. It's much easier for us as a city that owns land to attract a buyer or attract a data center if we control the property. Again, if that doesn't work out, or that's not what the best use for the city to sell this to, we will go there. But the land's not for sale right now. So we have no discussions with anyone, whether it's Mr. Jensen or whether it's anybody. So when we're ready to sell the land, and the other thing is that just finally is that if we peel off 17 acres, it affects what the rest of the land's going to do. So is it wise to peel off 17 acres? Let's just say we do have a data center, and all of a sudden we've lost 17 acres, and now we've got a conflict between residential and a data center, which there wouldn't be much of because they're quiet places. But if it's a Cub food, that's an issue. So we want to make sure, and, I understand that, I don't know what the prior discussions were prior to November of last year, but there's never been a contract, there's never been an offer for sale. Mr. Jensen just sent that letter he told the mayor last week, so we have no action.
Okay, well, I've gathered that in, and I still want to appreciate a developer's opportunity, so I'm going to try and work this back my way to see what happens. I understand getting these preliminary bits of information. I see us paying to get that information. I see it down the road a ways, which is the dilemma for him. He has the extra costs of moving a utility line to access the property. If you had that moved or paid for that moved, you have to, for that distance, and you could absorb that in your project, then you're not buying any city land at this point. There's no consequence. You're able to move ahead on a certain amount of development, but you have an unknown future. We have 115 acres, and I've always been an advocate, and I've drawn a series of plans just trying to push the point that we should, a long time ago, start thinking about how we're going to try and hold property. Residential maybe moving up from the south, more commercial, business park pushing off of the parkway. If you look at even a 200,000 square foot data center, we're talking 12, 13 acres of associated land. If we look at putting infrastructure in and say take 20% of the whole property, you're going to still have, that's maybe 20, 30 acres of land associated with roads and easements and everything else. We still have a sizable piece of land, even though I'm not accounting for water or wetland at this point because I don't know how extensive that is. So there's property there, and there's property to see that you can comfortably understand how residential could move up from the south and how business could move from the north down, and there could be sandwiched in there someplace something like a data center, if the data center proves to be a worthwhile thing. I love the technology corridor idea, so I'd never try and challenge it until we knew more about it. But I'm just trying to find something that allows a developer to move ahead to some degree. That's possibly not buying any city land, but acknowledging now that we have to start looking at, just like we did on McCullough's, we started to divvy it up into lots. We divvied it up into areas where we at least drew lines between one function and another. So you could draw a line, essentially a line from Parkway going south that says we want to preserve this for business and stuff. And then you could start to see where that transitions, and that doesn't mean a data center or something else can't be sitting in between. I would like to think that we're going to make that next step after this first series of tests, where we get some information. I'd like to see us move next to that next step, acknowledging that that might be all arbitrary and wrong if a data center comes in, but maybe we allow for a data center to be a portion of that property. All of that seems like a believable master plan for the property as far as I can see.
And that's the point. We don't have a master plan. We don't know what we're doing with this yet. And it would be short-sighted to sell off 17 acres until we figure all that out, in my opinion.
Well, and you know, a data center might be how far off in the future in terms of knowing whether we win the game or not.
And I don't think you need to focus on a data center or homes or Cub Foods. There's something out there, whether it turns out to be a data center, whether it turns out to be houses, whether it turns out to be residential condominiums, whether it turns out to be commercial. Again, we go back to having to understand what the best use and what we should be doing with this property so that the best use of the land that we do own is taken into consideration. And if we're going to, for example, sell off the entire land, well, then we're going to put it on the market so that everybody can bid on it, not just one person.
Can we start those next steps, though? I mean, can we make that part of our agenda to move forward to do equivalent to what we did on
It's
McCullough?
on our radar, that's for sure. I mean, we have to get this part done first, and then we will see what this does and take the next steps as appropriate, sure. We may end up saying, well, we don't have any best use, and maybe we should sell it, but that's up to the city council to decide whether they're going to sell that. But, so yeah, we will move forward as we can.
Ryan, as far as that time frame, is that based on Ron or yours? How does that?
Where'd you get that date from?
Well, talking to you, I mean, not knowing what spring was gonna be like, I wanted to put a buffer in there, because I mean, obviously the wetland delineation, you can't go do it tomorrow because everything's not green. You know, talking to Ryan, we gotta wait for the site to green up. not knowing what kind of spring we're having. Granted, it's 70 degrees out right now, but in Wednesday, it's supposed to have a foot of snow. That can back everything up. So I put a buffer in there saying about July, but we should be able to get this work completed. Also having to be cognizant of the fact that Bolton and Mink has the schedule within their own workflows on this. So wanted to be a little bit conservative on there, so that time frame could shift up, could shift back, but I wanted to put a time frame in there that allowed for that scheduling, allowed for that spring to happen.
So once budding starts is when you can start wetland delineations. Like, could be 2, 3 weeks. Take a week to do the field work.
So you would have those same challenges then? I mean, you could,
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
that, so,
Yeah.
Well, the sentiment I'm hearing from staff is that you're sort of an isolated proposition down off city property until we go through these maneuvers and then we decide what our next maneuver is.
Right, and if I can address that, a couple of points. I think you can understand just tonight how hard it is to develop when the city's involved. Because if I have to develop against a city property, I'm gonna lose every time. You know, the city can always outmaneuver me on anything I do. So if the city's developing, any city that develops in its own city, I'm out of that city. Because there's just no chance to, you know, you don't know when you're getting approved or when you're not getting approved for the benefit. You can't compete against a city in development. It just can't be done, so you gotta go. I do wanna add a couple of things. The application says the property is for sale. It says yes. Is the property for sale? It says yes. So I'm ready to buy it. The next point is everyone is saying a data center. Is there any kind of a study that says a data center is a good idea? I know mine's a $24 million project on the property, the golf course property and the 17 acres. I know what that is. What does a data center bring to you? I think there's just a general idea that it's the life spring of money and it'll be the best thing that ever happened. But has anybody looked into it? I've looked into the one going up in Becker, and both the county and the city gave up all their tax money for 20 years. For some reason, they're selling them 300 acres, but they're putting in 6 acres worth of buildings. What are they going to do with the other 294 acres? You know, and maybe an acre of parking, because there's going to be 50 cars there. There are 50 workers. So you're throwing away a $24 million project for what? You know, is there any idea what a data center does? A data center that would fit in that place is going to have maybe 15 employees. Is that a good use of 100 acres? And lastly, the idea of what should we do with the property? Well, you've already said what you want to do with the property. You've zoned it residential. Your comp plan 2030 says it's zoned residential. Your comp plan 2040 cuts this out specifically and says residential. Whatever's to the north is mixed, but from the property I want to buy, that's planned in your 2040 residential. This is what I'm trying to do. So, you know, you say, have we done a study? Yes, you've done a study. You did your comp plan study, and it says residential for this area. So if you're going to change the zoning, that's fine. If you're going to change the comp plan, that's fine. But I want to know before I spend any more money. A golf course, the north end of a golf course is not a good place to put up a tip-up concrete building. It should be the best and highest use is residential. I'd like to be the one to do it.
Let me just give a little bit of backstory on how we got here, because I think there's a key component that's missing in this conversation right now. This first came forward a year ago, or the beginning of 18. It came to council. Council looked at it and said, bring it back to EDA for conversation, because at that time they said, look at it holistically, look at the whole 117. We're just not interested in carving out 5 acres at that point. We started that process. At the time too, we look back at how this parcel, how the market has approached this parcel outside of the residential side. We have had requests for information on this particular parcel for technology-based businesses. It's ranked high enough where we've actually had site selectors come out and look at it. So there's something about this parcel, when you look at it from the 20,000 foot view, Jamie is correct, there's thousands of acres surrounding it, but this particular parcel has access to utilities that are close. It has access to the fiber network that is close. It checks some of those initial boxes. So when we looked at it, we said, hey, if we're looking at the size of this parcel, we have 117 acres, we don't know what it looks like if you carve out the 20 acres to the south. Does that take it out of the market for a data center? So let's start the process to do that investigation. This grant application is that next step. It is to take a look at where are the wetlands in there, get some of those boxes checked, bring it back into the market to see if the technology center is interested in it. These things site on different sizes. Some site on 10 acres, and the one in Becker is 330 acres. They take a variety of different land sizes. So for us to go through right now and carve 20 acres off is premature because we don't know what that market's gonna do, and we don't wanna hamstring further future use of it. The conversations from the first time this came forward was, let's take a look at the entire parcel. Let's not carve off a chunk and basically not allow that future development to happen, which is why we brought in the technology corridor discussion to educate the EDA. What do these look like? What does the data center look like? What are some of the technology uses that could be on this particular parcel? We've also started looking at then, other, connectivity. We've had conversations with fiber providers. This thing does check those boxes. And the fact that we've actually ranked high enough to have, kind of through a pre-selection process of metro areas to actually rank high enough around site selectors, radar screens where they actually want to come out, tells me something that there is something about this particular parcel that would make it conducive for a technology corridor. So that's kind of where we've been. This conversation has happened. We've been told at staff level time and time again, look at it from the full 120. That's what we're trying to do with this wetland delineation and this phase one. These are two boxes where if you want to continue to position us in the market, these boxes need to be checked to keep us competitive. So we're just trying to ensure that we're competitive as we move forward, looking at the full 117.
And just to address the allegation that we've been putting up roadblocks. The city is very interested in development, as I think you all realize that. And we have gone through this process with him step by step, the numerous hours after hours of staff time. And just because we tell him we have to do this with the water, or that with the sewer, or this with the road, or that we're not in the position to sell it additional acreage, does not mean we're putting up roadblocks. We're following what we're supposed to do. We'd be happy to, sooner or later, get this land back on the tax rolls. It's just, again, going back to, we're focusing on data centers, but it's not, particularly might not be a data center. It can be anything. So we're moving cautiously and carefully, but as fast and as expedient we can. And we've been, and you can ask Ryan, with the amount of time he's spent, I think Mr. Jensen's talked to the county. I think he's talked to Dan numerous times. He's talked to Donovan. We've been nothing but cordial and cooperative and trying to go through every iteration that we possibly can of what this development, current development, at least not this plus 17 acres, but what he's currently given us. We've met with tons of hours and are continuing to do that. Thus, he's going to plan commission, so that's how much we've made it through that far. And then we'll go to council, and then if that's approved or the conditions are good, then we'll continue the process, but we're not treating him any differently than any other developer.
Any, as far as comments on the Donovan's thoughts on this and denying the concept plan, can you talk a little bit to that a little bit? Or?
Yeah, I don't think, I haven't seen the agenda material yet for Wednesday night. And I think I think that maybe some of that might have to do with some of the water and sewer arrangements and road. Some of the things are still outstanding. Some probably was denied, if I don't miss my guess. It's kind of an incomplete application still. But that doesn't mean we're done with the process and we're going to say no. I mean, as things with other developers work through, that's why we have concept plans. So we can work through some of those before the applicant starts spending some money, a lot of money, applying for zoning variances or whatever expenses there are that the city's going to charge when we formally get to their engineering costs and things like that. That's why we go through the concept plan, so we can try to knock out some of those issues early. So I don't believe it's a dead stop denial. I think it's just has to do with some incomplete assumptions on the development part. But I will know better on that tomorrow when we speak about Wednesday's meeting.
Well, I will find some comfort if and once we do this first step, that we find that continuum of effort and it's a tangible continuum of effort. And if that can happen, then I think we will progress to a point where we can say, we now understand who we're seeking or what we're open for or what we're trying to define. Just want to see that continuum of effort. Outside of that, I don't know what to tell you.
No, I'm not expecting you to tell me anything, other than the studies don't tell you what to do with the property. They don't say it should be a cub, or it should be residential, it should be a data center. They don't tell you that. They just tell you what's on the ground now, but it doesn't give you any more information on what to do with the land.
It does give you information. Say we had wetland sites on McCulloch's, we know then how to draw the lines that you mentioned before, where we can and can't do, how the best cutting up of the property, what the best use is, if we know where those things are first. And we need
Well,
to
I'm
know
certainly
them.
in favor of these evaluations. Ryan, does a wetland study changes according to what? Is it as fickle as 2 years, 3 years,
Wetland delineation approved today would be approved for 5 years.
5 years?
Well, so I guess my thought is on, the timing is whether you're offered to do it or the city with the help of the county does it, we really need that information. And I would think if I'm the developer, if someone's willing to do that at no charge, and if the time frame can somehow be moved up, and we're at the mercy of Mother Nature, so it's almost something we can do, but I think the idea of having some residential along the golf course, a beautiful view in that is great, and if there's somehow you could marry those two together where we can, and if it's not a data center, some type of a commercial aspect there, I think it would be great long-term. And I understand your concern about wanting to move it up. You've got time into this and money, and so whatever city staff can do to continue that discussion and try to make this thing happen sooner than later. So thanks for
Okay.
your
Thank you.
time. So do we have, I guess, someone want to make a motion just for further discussion on actually approving the grant?
No more discussion. I would motion that we approve the grant.
Yeah, you'd actually be looking for a two-part. We'd be looking to approve the grant application, and then second would be approve the resolution, which is, I believe, on page 9 of your packet. It's Resolution 040819-01.
Okay, so I guess I'll make the first motion to approve the development grant application, CDA pre-approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Okay, that passes. And then does someone want to make a motion, second motion on the resolution? Or first motion, I should say. Motion on the second approval.
I would move that. So moved.
You need that, the exact resolution? Not,
I got it.
okay. And is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Aye, that carries. All right. Number 5, Dandy Automotive Downtown Incentive Program application. I don't know who's going to take that one.
President, members of the EDA, you have on, I apologize, page 24 of your packet is the application that was made by Dandy Autos for the Downtown Redevelopment Incentive Program. They were looking for a $5,000 tax abatement for the improvement work that they did to the exterior of their building. They went through a fairly extensive renovation of the exterior of their building. They did siding and some signage upgrades. Looked at the application, staff reviewed it, and it does meet all of the qualifications for the program. So therefore, we're recommending approval of the Downtown Incentive Program. Just on the timing perspective of this one came in late last year. It came in late of 2018. At the time it was submitted, it was an incomplete application. They did supply the additional information that was required, so we did have all the information. So That's why this one was talked about kind of late last year, if you recall. Now it's coming back forward again just for review and approval. But the goal of the EDA was to approve 3 applications in 19. This would be the first one that's approved in 19 as part of the work plan that was approved in the summer of 18.
Right, any questions on
Just
that?
for clarity, would you describe the tax abatement idea? Is it just in 2019 now they will not be charged equivalent to $5,000 worth of taxes?
The way this was done the last time, they issued that if they were current on their taxes, they just got that amount back. They got the $5,000
Or
basically.
had they already, if they had already
If
paid?
you wrote them a check back for 5,000, that's what's envisioned here. And we did verify they are current and everything, so that has been verified. But yeah, we just write them a check back for the $5,000.
Because this is 2018 we're really talking about.
The work was done, it was submitted in 19, the application was completed in 19. We did this exact same thing too, I can't remember what building downtown, it came in after the grant, the incentive program got approved after they went through a fairly extensive renovation, and we gave them retro on that as well.
The old Holiday gas
Yeah,
station.
that was, yep, correct.
Well, I think it looks great. I mean, if we remember the building, how it used to look, it
Yes.
really does look nice.
I make a motion that we approve it.
And I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Okay, number 6, ULI workshop debrief.
Yeah, this is just on the agenda as we had the ULI workshop come in March of 18. They kind of gave us a lot of information and kind of what's going well in Forest Lake, areas that, we could use for improvement. They kind of gave their technical expertise. The ULI did provide the summary that's enclosed in the packet, kind of what they kind of figured some of the key takeaways are. Just kind of want to take a moment to get the EDA's perspective on, what they kind of feel, the benefits of the workshop were, and key takeaways that aren't included in this that you want us to consider moving forward. Just kind of keep that conversation going because a lot of information was presented during that meeting. Just want to let the EDA know that I did reach out to one of the presenters, and I did get a copy of all of the data, like the actual source data that they use from the demographic perspective. So I do have all of the links to it. I have not had a chance to go back through and actually start to carve out some of like the next level nuanced information in there, because they kind of gave us the 20,000 foot viewpoint and some of the demographic data. She did give me the source code for all of that, so I can go back in and start running different projections on that. So that was a good benefit out of the workshop. We do have access to some additional demographic data. So I just wanted you to be aware that, some work will continue on that demographic data as well. But it's more of an opportunity right now for EDA to provide feedback to kind of say, I like this portion of it, kind of focus on here. So just kind of looking for some initial feedback on the workshop.
Is that demographic information a long ways out by the time you synthesize it or whatever you're going to do with it?
I asked them when it was current, and they want to say it was a couple of years, it was starting to age a little bit, but in terms of what you can get at this point, it's probably as current as I want to be able to find. I think the next census data will unleash a whole nother level of more current data, and that census count starts in April of next year. So we should have some additional data coming in the near-term future. So we're kind of starting to age out a little bit on the data sources. But the one benefit is if you develop kind of your approach to the old data set, the new data will, you can just take those programs and apply them right to the new stuff and resynthesize it using the same approach. You just change out your data sources.
Does the data differ much from the comprehensive plan studies?
I haven't gotten to the level of detail on that. I haven't really started to parse the two data sources out at this point, so I can't speak to that.
But it might be much the same components of data.
Could be, like I said, I haven't done a side-by-side comparison on it.
Well, I thought it was a great 2 hours spent. I mean, the information that was presented to us, and just to be able to have that discussion with some people in the room that are on the ground and know a lot about developing all that was huge. The takeaway for me, I think, as far as going, what we plan on doing maybe potentially with the properties downtown is, they said that people are willing to make that commute into the cities, but once they get home, they want to stay home. They want to have to get back in their cars again and drive, whatever. So the idea of trying to get more housing downtown and then, you know, the retail and the restaurants hopefully would follow that. I think that was good, encouraging for me, I guess, because you think about people in the commute, it doesn't sound like the hangup is that much, just once they get home, they don't want to get back in the car. So I think for our downtown and all the positives that they mentioned, I think that's good. One of the concerning things, and one of the gentlemen, I forget which one, he had the cabin up north, and he stops in Forest Lake every week, and he's never seen our downtown. That's a concerning, like,
Well-
what do we do? You know, how do you change that, I guess, but I thought it was great. It was really well done.
Well, the information I see on the memorandum here is useful, and I have no qualms about anything that's here, and I see things that they pointed to. There's that continuum of the next step then. So we have this information, and we have to start thinking about how does one take a downtown Forest Lake and make it as compelling as they say as the asset that they suggest it is. And so we've had this discussion for many years, and so it's always come to a point where it never moves forward in terms of an action, other than to say we lament that it isn't and we wish that it were. And so there are actions, there are things you can do and talk about. And so I'm hopeful that what we'll do is start talking about actual movement. Again, a continuum of moving an idea forward. Here's a premise. We can get a sense of the vitality or the importance of the downtown added to what we've already believed. And now we have to start talking legitimately about, well, what can you do? And there are things to do. So I think I'd like to see that discussion start to arrive.
I think just to follow up on that point, there have been a couple of, small steps out of that workshop that, that have started. One of the things that was brought up was to know your inventory of available assets, kind of keeping that running list of what do you have available. So if you're asked the question of what do you have that list contained. So Chris does a great job of forwarding if there's a market, a piece of property's on the market, if something's available for rental. So all of those are now going into a folder on my inbox. So everything's sitting there. So if somebody does come in, there's a list. There's also some city-owned assets that we could potentially dust off and bring to the top of the list as well. So we can really dive in, not just we have 5 acres here, but really dive into like the site specific, what do we have available on the site, utilities there, what's there. So we can kind of get to those next level conversations without having to stall the project because, as they kind of alluded to during the conversation here, in development, time is money, and the more information that you can get to a developer and early on in the process will help. So there's been that kind of takeaway. Another thing that started was at the Lakes Area Expo, we started handing out it's not scientific market research by any means, but it was just kind of a handout that you could give to attendees that says, why do you love Forest Lake? Complete the sentence. So we can start to kind of figure out, because they kind of alluded to there's some key strengths here, but they had a hard time really honing in on what that actually is. So we're actually going out to the residents right now, granted casually, so we're not doing like the scientific-based study, but just trying to get a consensus or some type of feedback as to why people like Forest Lake. I heard a lot of comments. I like it because it's quiet, it's family-friendly. I love some of the park programming that's available. So we started to collect some of that feedback so we can start to hone in, which again will help to kind of enlighten marketing efforts for the city as well. So we have started to kind of take some small steps out of the ULI. So there is some of those kind of, they're not giant leaps at this point, but they are kind of the first steps in a much bigger process.
I liked what they had to say as a realtor about the housing and how we should be proactive and ready with the ordinances on the accessory dwellings for the aged, to keep them aging in place. And if we have that now, we'll be able to handle that when it comes before it. And then the smaller lot sizes, I've had a lot of people talking about wanting smaller lots, cheaper houses, but and we'd be happy with a much smaller lot. And then I was really happy to hear them talk about Forest Lake's assets, which is the lake itself and the unique downtown. And I'm in 2 other groups that we're doing asset resources, and the lake and downtown come up over and over again about how we're not utilizing them for our citizens and to draw people into the community. So I think that's really got to become more of a focus with the downtown redevelopment, sprucing it up and getting the word out. I was just happy to hear them say that, that express the same thing Chris has said in the past about our unique situation.
Is it on the planning commission's radar to start looking at those zoning issues, to actually start finding definition?
I think where they're dealing first with the comprehensive plan, once they get that process completed, then we can shift towards that, because that's pretty involved. We're almost done with that. I think it goes for review shortly, if I recall, so.
Do you know when? Just
I
shortly
think
is.
sometime in May it'll be submitted to the Met for review.
Well, you know, and sometimes I don't know, premature, however this might be, the idea of, say, now bringing forward, there's a lot of land in flux right now downtown. A lot of land, there might be 3+ parcels in flux going through transitions in terms of their values and wondering what their outcomes are. Is it appropriate to bring forward, even though it's a conceptual notion to the city, that let's talk about X pieces and what can transition there? And what might a city do to do something about that if a city so chose to do so? And there's everything from purchase and demolition to just supporting others who may see a composite use out of 2 or 3 pieces that come together and become something. Is it way too early to start bringing forward a tangible notion about what we could do next downtown? Because that's how I think anyway.
No, I think any discussion is positive and moving forward, not to, knock any of that out, but discussion doesn't hurt, We might as well start talking about what the downtown is. Probably should also start looking at what kind of plan for the whole downtown and what's the boundaries of that downtown? Do we want to extend it out like to here? And what's the, the makeup I've heard, we should take power poles and put them on the ground. And so we should really have a master plan for the downtown and define what those boundaries are. And I know that takes a little bit of time, and I know we're talking a lot about we need to plan, but we also need to plan so we know what we can do too and what can go there. So I think both have to go in tandem as much as possible.
And it would be nice to get at least some notions in our thought pattern right now, because things that happen downtown for properties happen quickly and on their own. And so there's no set timetable for that, but you can see that they're pending. You can see that they're on the horizon. And so it would be nice to at least have those conversations and keep it at least on our radar.
When you say planning, I know that the gentleman, I believe on the end in that the panel discussion, his company did that, did he not, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Is that someone we contract out to and try to get
Yeah,
that in
yes,
play?
absolutely. I mean, and that's what we have to approach, and who the firms that do that, like Ryan's firm may do that because they're professional planners, and just engage, get an RFP or whatever the case may be, and and fund a study that tells us where we should be going. That should go very quick. The only thing that restrains us is resources on the staff level. I mean, it's a very small staff here, so we're confined to so many hours we can put into this subject or that subject or another subject. So as we can fit it in, I mean, I'm not making an excuse, but it's a very tight staff here, so it takes a lot of work to get these, and we're right now in the middle of a strategic plan. Right now, we need to go out for the garbage RFP, and there's a whole bunch of other things, so, hiring a finance director. But so we'll get there, it's just, we'll just try to put it on the list and see how fast we can do it.
Yeah, so I don't know if that would be something that the EDA funded potentially with our budget, or something we look at for 20.
And we'll have to come back, and I'm not sure how we would fund it yet, so.
Well, as long as we're talking downtown, maybe we'll just bring the whole piece in and then go to Chris and Nan. So some thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, I have my own storyline. I have a variety of storylines. I know that there was a meeting with staff and the players on the other side this last Thursday. Maybe we could start by just getting a conclusion or a summation or an attitude from you folks about what happened.
Sure. Obviously, the Hool property is still for sale. One of the fortunate things about the discussion of the Hotel Convention Center was that it got out in the paper, and now it's my understanding there's more than one or two people interested as well to develop the property, whatever their projects are. So it shone the light on that particular piece of property. There was a reconfirmation, as we had at the meeting when we had the workshop, is that the city will not be interested in buying that piece of property. And that I believe the Hools are going to move forward with another opportunity. The Hotel Convention Center, while maybe a great idea, it was really similar to the previous gentleman. It was kind of in the sky, and we had a hard time getting anybody to tell us exactly what they wanted to do or how they wanted to do it, and knowing what the city's contribution is going to be, what the work was going to be, what the dollar amount was going to be. And I know I did a little bit of financial calculations based on their Mason City. What I saw from their Mason City, it may have changed in the last year, but it's an expensive project for the city if we were undertaking that. So not that we didn't want to, but it just didn't seem to mesh very well. So I think the Hool is, based on some of my conversations, will move on to see what the next suitor might be.
That certainly is the most likely case here, but the storyline that I thought was just fascinating to me was that the prospect of a hotel, by the seat of my pants, I have a sense that that might have been a good thing to have, although I need third-party cooperation. I need proof from a third party. A convention, bring it down to large overscale banquet facility. Again, I need that cooperation. Somebody needs to tell me that that makes sense in this marketplace. Whether a restaurant in the sky is just another fanciful notion that I can latch onto. But stopping myself from getting too fanciful about this, I saw an ownership of a piece of property that is really valued. Let's just say it was purchased. Why don't I just make a hypothetical out of this and say, let's say the city purchased it for 1.5. That asset's valuable on down the road. I see that asset being easily one you're not worried about really having for a while. And the owners of the land were offering quite the deal for 5 years, no interest, no principal, and just wanted to be alleviated from taxes and be allowed to use their business. So there was a hold there with just a small downstroke of money. And I was always hoping that there could be some paper arrangement between the city and the developer and the landowners to say, let's at least take this 2-month period of time and co-invest in validating this idea. And had that happen and had the validation come back, then I have no trouble picturing how it would be a good investment that where the city's only stake in the game could have been the land and the land lease and contributing the other small parcels they have there, and where everything else is taken care of by private development. And I could see how there could be a strong community attribute to all of this, be it everything from Maskers Theater in a space to Forest Lakes, I get carried away, but Forest Lakes, Historical Society moving in there and making that the decor, the Hool family legacy and the decor being what's said inside. I saw community attributes. I saw something that stimulates downtown far more than any housing project would. And I saw this little potential of it could be a partnership, and it didn't seem extreme, and the city wouldn't have to be in any further than maybe the equivalent of that 1.5 in one form or another. I carried that fantasy for a while and thought, man, this could be cool. And this really would speak to our downtown story dramatically. But it was presented poorly and segmented, and it didn't come in the right way. And it was never selling not just a piece of land, but it was never selling a concept. And it's really the concept that would make a city want to buy that piece of land, not the piece of land unto itself, but a concept of how this could be a great hospitality feature for downtown. So there's the story I followed. That's why I was a proponent to see at least get to a day of reckoning here at the council or wherever. And I'm kind of sad that it has kind of faded away as quickly as it did. And maybe there is another hotel out there that would like to follow that story. Maybe we can still get housing by still maintaining a strong commercial essence on Broadway so that our downtown just doesn't quit into a residential barrier and then try and pick up again. I think we can get to all of that with other kinds of development proposals as well, but this was a wonderful moment, and I got excited about it.
So, Gatehouse, they're out. Is that,
Gatehouse is free to come back with a concrete proposal anytime they wish, but it's a concrete proposal that we can understand, that we can move forward with if that's the case. That's, yeah, if they want to come back and if they can convince the Hools, whatever they can do, but we need more to understand what the proposal is and to where to go. We never really got that kind of a vibe or even information that
Yeah.
what the solid steps were supposed to be. I mean, you know, the history of development here is the developer comes in, has the plan already, he's pretty much done the study work and knows what they need and what they don't need. There was just too many unanswered questions as far as I was concerned.
If I can see how that came forward that way, was there ever a hope that it really could have been like I said, a paper agreement that the city, the Hools, and the developer would have co-invested in getting that information, that validation?
Again, we're always open to talking and coming to some kind of agreement, and if we just had some concrete information and some ongoing discussions and saying, okay, here's the real plan, maybe we could have got there. And again, the door's not closed, but we need to have a little bit more straightforward talk about what he's going to do.
Has there been any conversation? Have we reached out to them and said, hey,
We had a meeting, as you
Yeah,
mentioned, last week,
last-
and
okay.
we've emailed before, and no, I mean, there hasn't.
But after the, okay, so no details.
No, I mean, the details always came down to a $150,000 study, and the city gave money to Gatehouse Capital to a $150,000 study, and then if it doesn't work out, or if it works out, we get it back, and if it doesn't, they keep it. But, if we wanted to go with a study like that, I would have recommended to the city that the city does that study and pays for it, so there's no, again, there's no bias on anybody's, it's a straight, clean, clear study, so that, so that when a developer goes to somebody to do a study, not that I don't trust the developer, but, I want to make sure that whoever the study is, if we're putting the money in, that it's they represent the city as best they can, so.
There was enough of a concept on property that the whole thing just needed the study and the evaluations and the feasibility. It was wanting for that. To me, the biggest piece was the feasibility, and that would have been a go, no-go position as far as I'm concerned. And so, I don't know, I'm always pushing, that's what I do.
I hadn't noticed.
It just seems cool yet that the Hools were willing to hold position, and that if it only takes,
Yeah.
in my history, it only takes a month to get a feasibility if you've got a contract signed for them to do it, and it'd be in the category of $24,000 to get one that's legitimate before financial institutions.
Well, if it was $20,000 to $24,000, we would have had a much more distinct discussion than $150,000.
It's a shame they presented it that way, because it shouldn't have come forward as a city all-in kind of game. It should have come forward as something that was a softer entry. And we could have all felt more comfortable about moving ahead had that validation come forward. Then maybe that would have looked like an attractive piece of property to hold for a very specific outcome, instead of letting the marketplace roll with it now. So do I just put that in the category of it's a shame, or should I talk to the Hools and see if they want to keep going?
I think the mayor and you have to have a discussion about that.
Happily, I'll do that.
so is the intent then to sell it and then a kind of a similar business operate out of there? Is that?
I have no idea what the other interested parties are, and I just know that with the meeting last week that there have been a number of different parties now looking at that property because, you know, information is good. It got out there, it was in all the papers, it was on the radio, TV, or whatever. So that, you know, turned the light on for the moths to come and see, so it was a good thing, actually. So either way, I mean, if it doesn't end up being a convention and hotel, there's other people interested right now. So I just don't know who. I can't tell you who that is.
Well, there again, though, we're talking about the property, the 117 acres, and really knowing what would be best there. Do we know what would be best on the whole property? And you know, we definitely decided the city did not want to own that property to control that.
Right.
You know, is there a chance that we can do a feasibility study on our own for what would be best there? For $25,000?
If you have a very specific outcome you're looking at, judge this outcome, and then yes, you
Yes.
can get it to do that. But not this broader thing, what is the best outcome on that property? I think you can make subjective decisions, you know, about what this group or the council would like to see there, and then maybe we can try and gear it toward that.
Yeah, and I agree with the concept that was brought up about continuing the retail so that it doesn't break up and it's just not, you know, a big,
Residential.
tall housing building of some type. I think there's some need to make that a part of the downtown and overall plan somehow. But, I mean, again, we react to concepts when they come in and what they
Well,
do.
I will talk to the mayor and I'll talk to the Hools if that seems appropriate, and then I'll see if there is any forward motion. If not, we're just wait and see what knocks on the door, I guess, and I know there is knocks coming.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, item 7, Washington County updates. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Good evening. I don't have any formal reports for you tonight or any formal updates, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have of me.
Chris, the technology corridor, to pursue that and start to understand it as time goes on, we'll do these studies, so that's sort of secondary to that in some ways. How fast or what pace is coming with this idea of understanding whether this technology corridor becomes a Forest Lake property or not, and what really comes along with that possible data center? Just a new education from whomever is the best educator to start telling us that this data center makes sense. There are things that piggyback off of that dramatically that need to be adjacent. I mean, those kinds of things I'd like to start to understand if we can.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Fenneman, that's a great question. And keep in mind that the data center term here, I think, is being used fairly loosely. We are looking at also technology businesses like a software company or an engineering firm or a healthcare business of some type. A type of business that would likely look at this area would be somebody that moves large volumes of data. And we found out through our discussions with site selectors, and as Dan mentioned with Zayo, who provides unlimited broadband capability in that area, that we do have a lot of the things that a technology company would look at. Now, a technology company could certainly include a data center, but that would not be the only type of a business that we would market to. We would look for all kinds of opportunities for high wage paying jobs in that corridor. And so as we continue to define the technology corridor and start to market it, we want to continue to work with our site selector friends that are in that business, and certainly Connexus Energy and Excel Energy, who are out doing these data center trade shows and technology trade shows across the nation. They're down in Atlanta and Dallas and I think Phoenix or Las Vegas on a regular basis marketing our area because, of course, they want to sell power, and we want to sell land, and we want to sell our community for good paying jobs. And so we don't, there's no right or wrong way to do this marketing effort, but we want to see first, number one, which I think you're on the right track, is this area even suitable for it? Once we find the wetland delineation and environmental review, that's a good start. What's next? We continue, maybe do maybe some type of a utility study to find out, okay, if a technology company does locate here, let's say it's an engineering firm or a software company of some sort, what would they need for utilities? And then we can continue to do that work. But I think just to have our name out there saying we're interested, we're open for business, we want technology businesses to come here because we have the land available, we have the technology through fiber, we have very reliable sources of electricity through Connexus Energy and East Central or Excel Energy. And we just want to make sure that we're in the game and have a chance to land a company like that if they do choose Minnesota. And I think I mentioned at one of the last meetings that when we even found out that Google was looking at coming to Minnesota, that's a good thing for Minnesota. Historically, we haven't even been on their radar, if you will. And just keep in mind when Google did land in Iowa a number of years ago, it was back in 2008, they made a decision to build a data center in Iowa, and shortly thereafter, Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook all chose to locate a data center in Iowa. So this is the first step of what could be something really cool for Minnesota. And if we do have that opportunity to land a technology business, we've got to have a site for them. And that's kind of where we're at tonight with this first phase that we're looking at with this study. And there, of course, will be more work to be done. There's no guarantee that we're going to land a technology business, but we should have at least a site in mind that would be of interest to them, and then go out and market it and see what we can get. And that's kind of where we're at. So I don't know if I answered your question,
Oh,
Commissioner.
absolutely, Chris. So far, we're a grouping of cities and counties that has identified itself, and we are now in the process of saying, here's parcels or land that can be applied.
Correct.
Is that, other than this one piece, the 117, are we starting to assemble other pieces?
So that's another great question. So yes, we should be. And if we can find that there are smaller parcels that a technology company is interested in looking at that still has reliable power and unlimited broadband connectivity to downtown Minneapolis or wherever they want to connect to, yes, we should be looking at other sites as well. And I wouldn't limit it just to this site, but I think this land that the city owns does give you an opportunity. You control the property, to control the destination of it. There aren't many sites in this corridor or even in the state that are city-owned that you guys could decide what you want to do with it and who to sell it to. That's kind of a unique opportunity, and I think that goes a long way with a site selector or a company that's looking at working with a city to find a site.
Thanks, Chris.
Great question. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chris? No? And Nan, the chamber update?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Just a few things. I'll keep it short so that you can move on. But first, we've been welcoming new businesses, so that's been great. There's been several that have started brand new, and we've been welcoming them, whether they are part of the chamber or just doing some ribbon cuttings. We did have our Lakes Area Expo, which we housed 70 vendors at the event and had over 1,000 people come through the doors. And so that was fantastic. Dan was there with the city and some of his staff, and Open to Business presented as one of our presenters. So it was a great event. People all over the entire church location that we were at. So I was very pleased with what happened there. The last thing that I was going to mention to you, because we've been talking downtown, and somehow I got invited to a meeting with some local individuals that just said, hey, would you come and talk with us? And they very much are passionate. They're local residents that have a passion for the downtown area. And in the midst of meeting with this group over time, we've talked pretty at depth as to what have been some hindrances for those downtown businesses. I'm not the problem solver for that, but I can do things to help drive business to them. And so we're in the process right now. As soon as I get through one more event this week, I'll be putting my efforts towards just a small event. We're going to give it a shot and do it the Thursday before Mother's Day. That will be a walking, just on the one side of the street, kind of trial run on what's in other communities is known as a wine walk. So lots of women walking the street and shopping. And so we're going to do a mini version of that coming up in May, just really with the intention of driving business to that, basically from Vanilli's down to Ernie's Eatery, stay on that side of the street so that we're not crossing over the traffic and all that, but see how that goes. And then hopefully, if it all goes well, look at a larger scale event in the fall. So that's what we've been doing. Any questions?
I think so. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you also working with there's a smaller group that's getting together to try and talk about maybe it's more beautification than anything else of the downtown. Is the
That-
chamber part of that story?
That's the same group. It just so happened that, our conversation went to some of the struggles that some of those downtown business, because some of the people in that meeting were downtown businesses. And so that's kind of how we got onto, well, what can we do to help them thrive after the construction and just the various things, the weather, all the things that have been happening over the last year. So, and I had this idea to do this sort of wine walk, so they jumped on it, so away we go.
Okay, thanks.
All right, does anyone have anything else for tonight? Ryan, do you have anything you want to add, or so?
I have one question. Is signage part of the comprehensive plan?
Downtown?
Business sign, yeah.
I don't know, I'll have to see. Should be, our sign ordinance, yeah. I'll look, I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.